I'm going to start with the dry stuff first, because there are so many fun things to talk about in the travel industry that to talk about insurance is probably the least fun part of it, but it's absolutely something that you should consider. I'm not sure what your budgets are, but if you're spending from your $10,000 to $15,000 per person for your trip, then you should protect those funds. And if you do it as soon as you start planning, it's very important. So I have a couple of slides for you just to look at quickly. The first one has to do with the travel insurance coverage. It normally includes 5 or 6 different pieces. And those pieces are, you can see, the trip cancellation protection. If you have to cancel your trip after you've paid money. Travel is a business. The cruise lines, the tour companies, they've hired staff, they've provided supplies, and they consider your commitment to them binding. So if you have your trip and you're within 30 days, you could lose everything that you've paid if you do not have trip cancellation insurance. Trip interruption and travel delay, those are very different things. Trip delay simply means the flight's not going to take off for maybe 4 or 6 hours, and you might end up overnighting somewhere. But trip interruption means you just have to come home in the middle of it. And you will want protection for both of those. It can be very expensive to buy a new business class ticket to come home. So those are things to consider. If you've broken a leg, you're not going to be in coach. Hopefully you weren't in coach in the first place. But if you're up front, then, you know, it can be expensive to buy a last-minute one-way ticket home. Emergency medical insurance is very important. Most of our medical insurance does not protect you overseas. I don't know who has what insurance here. I know Medicare will do nothing for you overseas. If you have a good, strong insurance company from an international business that you've worked for years, you might have medical insurance, but most of the time you will not. Medical evacuation insurance is even more important. If you're in Africa and you have to come home, $500,000 might cover the cost of you being medevaced out. Roy just told me a story about someone that cost him $45,000 just to get from the scene of an accident to an international hospital. These are all things you consider before you take the trip. There was baggage delay and loss on that. I skipped it. I should not, but it's a very minor piece, and they're very particular about how much they'll pay you per day if your bags are lost or delayed. And also, in the larger scheme of things, with the trips that we take now, it's a minor amount. I presume that you're not traveling with most of your diamonds anyway, so please leave them at home. And cameras and things like that might be covered by your homeowner's insurance, but still, most package policies will have some form of baggage insurance for you. Trip cancellation insurance, that's going to protect you from cancellations prior to departure. And it's going to cover not only you and your traveling companions, it's going to cover your family members if you must cancel because Aunt Millie is sick. If Cousin George is sick, they might not cover you. Rarely are cousins covered if you have to cancel for that reason. Pre-existing conditions are covered almost always if you buy your insurance within 21 days of departure. Very important caveat. You must be fit to travel at the time you buy your insurance. I was just telling this story about one of my dear clients who was talking to me about a trip. It was just in the U.S. All of a sudden, I didn't hear from him for a couple of months. He calls back. We go back into planning to get his trip to the American Southwest this year. And he says, well, we stopped planning because my wife had a heart attack. So, but she was better now, and they were planning on traveling. So we made the arrangements, we got the trip cancellation insurance, and then she couldn't travel. And that was when he confessed that maybe she wasn't fit to travel at the time we bought the insurance. She's in Boston, I'm in Doylestown. There are things you don't get to see. I don't get to see a lot of my clients. I have to depend upon your knowledge of your body and your physical condition and your medical condition. But if you have a question about your insurance and if it will cover, then absolutely pick up the phone and call the insurance company yourself. Having said that, if Louise with the travel insurance company tells you you're covered, but the paperwork doesn't, believe the paperwork. Okay? Absolutely believe the paperwork. Natural disasters, strikes, and bankruptcies are frequently covered by your trip cancellation insurance. After all of the hurricanes this year, who got stuck? Who didn't get to travel in the fall? Anybody? Oh wow, this is a lucky group. I have a bride that's getting married in January, and she's not getting married in St. John. She's now going to be getting married in Belize. And the good news is it covered. The insurance covered her for that. So very important, natural disasters. And for those who think natural disasters don't happen, though of course with this hurricane season, that's hard for me to say. Think of the Icelandic volcano that went off and just ash covered the northern Atlantic. Nobody could get across to Europe. I had clients on a Silver Sea cruise. The ship was only 20% capacity because 80% of the people could not get across the Atlantic to board it. If you did not have insurance, you were out of luck. So it's very important. Acts of war are not covered. Period. End of story. Acts of war declared or undeclared. It states in every policy I've read, they will not cover it. Acts of terrorism will be covered, but they're very specific. If you're going to France and the bombs went off in Belgium, they may not cover that because Belgium was not on your itinerary. So they will expect you to travel to France. And the maximum amount is the cost of your trip. So if you have trip cancellation insurance, your trip was $50,000, you'll be protected for $50,000, providing, of course, you're canceling for a covered reason. There are policies that will let you cancel for any reason. I rarely recommend them. The price is almost 50% higher, and you do not get back all of your money. It's 75 or 80% that you get back. So you really have to look at the total cost of the trip and the insurance to determine if it's worthwhile for you. They will allow you, some policies will allow you to cancel for work purposes. But I have an example where I have a state senator who wants to know if an important vote comes up, if he can fly home. And I haven't found an insurance company yet that's going to say the pro temp is allowed to bring him back. So these are all things that should be considered when you look at trip cancellation insurance. Emergency medical insurance, as I said, most U.S. insurance is not going to cover you overseas. If you break a leg and you have to go into an Italian hospital, number one, do you speak Italian when you need to talk to the doctor? But number two, you're not covered under their socialized medicine. You are not a citizen of the state. So you will have to provide credit cards for coverage or for payment out of pocket, or you need insurance. Most insurance companies, if you need to call them from overseas, will have someone call you back that speaks the local language. So that person can speak to the doctor on your behalf. Okay. As you can see, the policies vary. It depends on the quality. Each travel insurance company will have various levels. They'll have basic, they'll have silver, they'll have gold, or something similar. You need to decide which is best for you to take for your trip and for the protection. If you're going to Africa, as an example, or Asia, I would not take a basic insurance policy. That trip cancel, the medical evacuation is probably not more than $50,000 or $100,000, and that won't necessarily get you home. Here we are, we're back to medical evacuation. This is no fun. There are so many fun things to talk about with travel, but we'll just keep going and get through this. So if you need to be medevaced out, you definitely want the insurance company to be making the reservations for you. They'll put the money out. If you call the airline and say, I need to come home, and then ask to be reimbursed, you may have to put out whatever it takes for you to get back. And as I said, if you have to buy a one-way first-class ticket last minute, even from Venice, it's going to be $7,000 per person right off the top, because that's what a last-minute first-class ticket will cost. Okay. Oh, that's my one. This is my fun slide. This is New Zealand. This is Milford Sound. And I put it up there because I want you to think about all the other places in the world you can go to. Now that your estates are in place and you are mentally fit to travel, because we gave up chocolate. I have to talk to that woman about that one. Oh, I'm doomed. I love Hershey's. So I put this up here now so we can just talk about places you'd like to go, what's new, what's hot, things like that. So I did cover the dry part very quickly. I hope that's okay with you. I hope each and every one of you, as a travel agent, that you're talking to about your travel, and if not, then that you are taking the time and energy to research yourself to make sure that you're protected on your trips. Oh, one thing I meant to mention, and many credit cards now will protect you for trip cancellation insurance. Not all of them, but many of them. You should research that. They'll cover up to $10,000 per person. They will not necessarily include medical evacuation or medical insurance, but if you only need to buy one of those package policies that does not include the trip cancellation insurance, it's much less expensive. So I recently had a couple that they're going on a seaborne cruise in the Mediterranean. So it will be $10,000 per person for their insurance, for their coverage. Their policy itself, because they're in their 50s, was only about $576 to cover them. The minute they didn't need the trip protection, the trip cancellation protection, it was $76, and that's not an exaggeration. That's how much it dropped. So look at that. Look to see if your credit cards will cover you for trip cancellation. But make sure you understand the policy, because in that case, if I sold you a policy, I expect to be familiar with the policy and help you with the forms. I can't be the underwriter, but I can advise you. If you are using a credit card that covers you for trip cancellation insurance, it's between you and the credit card company. And you need to make sure that you know what's included and what is not. Okay? All right. So let's go back to New Zealand. I was asked to bring up some ideas of places to go, things to see, people to do. It's very hard to say what's the new place to do, what's the new hot, because unless it's exciting for you, or you, or you, it's not a great trip. My favorite place in the world is New Zealand. I've been 3 times, I go back again tomorrow. But that's because I love to be outdoors, I love the physical beauty of it, I love the wine and the food, I have to confess that. But some other people might want architecture classes. They might want a culinary trip. They may want to learn more about the history of the Incans. So when you plan a trip, think about what experiences you want when you travel. It's not even so much about where you go, but what do you want to do when you get there? Do you like to hike? Do you like to see museums? Do you want a private tour? Do you want to, one of my favorite things to do whenever my clients go to Europe is the first morning I have them with a private tour and guide that takes them around the city and acclimates them. So much of Europe is done on your feet. The cities were built to walk in, but if you don't know where you're going, so just those 4 hours with a private guide will get you to feeling comfortable, and then you can travel more independently throughout the city. Because even if we have tours, everything prearranged, you're still going to want to wander that city by yourself and understand. Okay. I was in the back talking to everybody. Many of you are very well traveled. I mean, when I first thought about discussing the travel insurance, I'm thinking they don't know it. They've already done it. But